In this review we look at a model of a machine made by a relatively new name in the original equipment sector. That name is Develon, and it's the new name for Doosan. The machine is the DX165WR, and there's a nice picture of it on the back of the box. And as you can see, it's a wheeled excavator. Looking underneath, we see the model is made by IMC and it's model number 16-1014, and there's technical information about the real machine.
Let's weigh it up.
Onto the weighbridge it goes, and it comes in at nearly 13 ounces, which is 360 grams. Without any more mucking about, let's open up the box and see what's inside. And as you can see, the model is held between a pair of plastic formers. These clip together, and when we take the top one off, we can release the model, and there are also two parts to attach. The model can be configured with an outrigger beam and a blade, and we fix the outrigger beam next to the rigid axle and the blade next to the steering axle. So first up we'll attach the outrigger beam, and it slots into a hole in the chassis of the machine. And the same process is repeated for the dozing blade. The connections are fairly stiff, but the design of the connection means it's fairly easy to rotate the dozing blade or beam.
Let's weigh it up again.
With the machine fully configured, we fly it back onto the weighbridge, and it's just over 9 ounces or 265 gramlets. Starting underneath, we can see the dozing blade on the left, and the steering axle is fairly simply modelled. The base plate is also fairly simple, with large screw heads modelled, and the box frames between the wheels are modelled in plastic. At the right is the outrigger beam, and the tyres have a decent tread pattern. The metal blade is fairly simple with some red highlights, and the silver connection rivets do stand out somewhat. You can see that the tyres are mounted on decent quality wheels, and there is detailing in the wheel hubs. The cab roof has got a solid roof light, and there's an aerial and painted beacon light, and there's a bank of spotlights at the front. There's also a plastic mirror and windscreen wiper, and inside the cab you can see the steering wheel and controls. Behind the cab there's some fine detailing, including grills formed of graphics, and the machine name is sharply drawn. There's a spotlight on top, and moving to the rear, the outriggers are an all-metal part. The riveting in this part of the model is reasonably discreet. There's a spotlight and camera above the counterweight, and some nice warning graphics. The Develon name has also been very nicely applied. On the opposite side of the body, the detailing is of a similar standard, and the handrails are modelled in metal and are reasonably thin. There's also a small grab rail at the front, and textured steps lead up. There's hydraulics detailing to the boom rams. Up on top there's some nice detailing, including an exhaust pipe and textured surfaces, and it gives a little bit of a busy appearance. The hydraulic pipes running up the top of the boom are modelled, and they lead to flexible hoses at the joint in the two-part boom. The high-quality hydraulics detailing continues across the second boom section, and that is with a mixture of pipes and hoses. There are also work lights and a sharp Develon name. Moving to the stick, and one set of hydraulics runs to the ram that controls the bucket, and it's good that the hydraulics for an auxiliary takeoff have also been modelled. There are a couple of large silver rivets on the stick, but the bucket is a nice metal casting. The rear wheels are fixed to a common axle so they spin together, whilst at the front the wheels are independent. There is steering and it achieves a moderate angle, and there's a little oscillation on the steering axle. Out onto the cranes etc. test track, and the Develon rolls well enough. And let's see if we can bend it like Develon. We apply the steering to the maximum and you get a moderate curve. At the front of the machine there is the dozing blade that we fitted, and it can be lowered and raised, so it can act as a blade or even as a stabiliser. There's a nice hinged protection plate on top. At the rear end we have the Outrigger Beam, and you can lower the pads to get stability. The rams are nice and stiff, but the beam does tend to rotate a little bit, and that's because of the method of fixing that we mentioned earlier. Let's have some rotation, and the model spins around in a reasonably precise fashion, albeit here is somewhat quicker than in real life. The 3-part boom and stick has a very good range of movement, and we'll start by reaching for the skies. If that's too much for you, you can reach out instead, and the rams are stiff enough to hold the pose perfectly. Or of course you can fold up nice and small. Let's dig deep and examine digging deep, and here we're using Cranes Etc's patented test method. And as you can see, the simulated digging at depth is very good. Another nice feature which all excavator models should have is a removable bucket. It's not easy to undo the nuts and bolts with salami-sized fingers, but if you want to take off the bucket, you can. It's also always nice to see how the engine is performing, and there's an opening cover on top, and there's a detailed engine underneath. This is a pleasing replica of a wheeled excavator by IMC Models. It has some very nice intricate detailing and decoration, and the functionality is also very good too, with just the floating outrigger beam and blade needing some attention when you pose the model. A model like this always poses well with others, so it's easy to produce mini dioramas, and overall the model is rated as very good.